All right. What is good, audience members, followers of EMPM? That stands for Engineering Major, Philosophy Minor. Welcome to this Thursday night, October 7th, 2021 stream or recording, whatever you want to call it. Vodcast is what I've been calling it. And I got to admit that now that I'm doing this recording, I'm in a much better mood than I was earlier today. And I think that we're going to need to talk about in another video coming up here why I was in such a bad mood, but we will save that for a different day. So I want to give you guys a quick heads up about what is happening on the screen in front of you in the city. We are still building this freeway exchange in city Skylines right here, working on Citrus Valley. And, in Citrus Valley, as you guys know, if you watch the, little city tour video, we've got a guy in Citrus Valley who started a wonderful oil extraction or oil drilling industry, and that is Eddie Loesch. And the city of the county of Citrus Valley and the various sub-cities in it are all proponents of fossil fuel usage, and that's what allows them to efficiently build these nice freeways like this and, host fancy events and have reliable, affordable, consistent power usage, and of course allows them to do things like logging and perhaps mining for ore and building buildings and all this good stuff. So Citrus Valley is a big fan of fossil fuels, but you know who's not a big fan of fossil fuels is Greta Thunberg. So in this video, we're going to watch a little snippet from one of Greta Thunberg's most recent popular viral climate change activism rants, and then I'm going to read you guys a little response that I wrote to it. And before we watch that, I have to give the obligatory grace to Greta. And that's the thing about us on the right is we give grace even though it's not given to us. And there's a part of that feels good, but sometimes you really wish that you could just slander people and hate on them. But that would not be good. That would not be godly. That would not be right. So we're going to give Greta a quick little note here. So let me go ahead and read this really fast for you guys. A quick note about Greta. Greta does not deserve wishes of bad faith, hatred, or physical confrontation. She's a teenager. Although even if she was an older adult like me, in her 30s or something like that, she still wouldn't deserve those things. But let's continue. I staunchly disagree with her ideas, but this does not mean she is ignorant. I hope that her fame does not lead her down the path of permanently ignoring countervailing scientific evidence and or moral inquiry. However, at this point in her life, she wants her ideas to be recognized by adults. Her and the media expect us and her following to treat her ideas as serious, compelling, and urgently worth consideration. So that is what I will do in this response. I will offer some serious critiques, moral counterpoints, and a bit of condescending sarcasm. And we're going to leave it at that for now, and let's go ahead and watch Greta's video.
There is no planet B. There is no planet blah. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. This is not about some expensive, politically correct green act of bunny hugging or blah, blah, blah. Build back better, blah, blah, blah. Green economy, blah, blah, blah. Net zero by 2050, blah, blah, blah. Net zero, blah, blah, blah. Climate neutral, blah, blah, blah. Our hopes and dreams drown in their empty words and promises. Of course, we need constructive dialogue, but they've now had 30 years of blah, 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 and where has that led us? Over 50% of all our CO2 emissions have occurred since 1990, and a third since 2005. If this is what they consider to be climate action, then we don't want it. They invite cherry-picked young people to meetings like this to pretend that they are listening to us. But they are not. They are clearly not listening to us. And they never have. Just look at the numbers. Look at the statistics. The emissions are still rising. The science doesn't lie.
And there you have it, guys. Wow, is she so proud of herself for reading that speech. So now we're going to give a little response to that speech. And again, this is something that I pre-wrote, so I'm going to start reading it now. I'll begin with the point that I did not find Greta's speech, or should I call it a slam poem, by my own research. Rather, I overheard a portion of the verbal art form through the Michael Knowles show. I later had to search for the complete version. The Blah 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 slam poem is about a 1 minute and 30-second segment, which is a short portion of an approximately 10-minute long speech. The remainder of the speech is worth addressing point by point in a different video. The reason my short story about finding the raw video is relevant is because the various video titles that feature the clipped minute and 30-second rant all contain some phrasing like the following. Blah, blah, blah. Greta Thunberg dismisses world leaders' climate rhetoric. The content of Greta's segment is certainly perplexing on its own, but the video titles, which I often liken to cable TV media chyrons, add yet another layer of confusion. Is Greta herself not lauded as a world leader with climate rhetoric? But the confusion grows when we hear the first portion of the clipped segment. Quote, there is no planet B. There is no planet. Blah. Blah, blah, blah. Ends with resounding applause from the audience. The fact that there was immediate applause seems to indicate a uniform ideological interpretation of Greta's statement. Granted, the audience's interpretation is likely aligned with Greta's intent, there is yet another interpretation that could be assigned. In the full version of the speech, there is no hint prior to this line that the intention behind the blah 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 is in reference to the lack of sufficient action by world leaders despite their grand rhetoric. But since I come from a totally different socio-political stance on climate change, I originally thought she was denigrating her own rhetoric. This prompted the question, how did the audience know the difference? Were they just applauding because it sounded like a good moment to applaud given the natural pause that Greta allowed? Greta said two hopeless statements. First, she said, there is no planet B, signifying we are stuck here on Earth. Secondly, she said, there is no planet, perhaps referencing the idea that the Earth has already passed a point of no return, after which it is inevitable that the planet will be uninhabitable by humans due to climate change alone at some unknowable point in the future. Setting my own political commentary on the second statement aside, these statements are then followed by a euphemism that denotes either that untrue statements have been shared or that excessive talking transpired and no one cares to listen. If Greta is dismissing rhetoric with this portion of the speech, it is certainly hard for me to distinguish which rhetoric she is dismissing or which philosophical stance she is against. Yet the audience applauds nonetheless. Are they applauding for the doomsday scenario being sold, or are they applauding because that same rhetoric that Greta just used has been used by dozens of world leaders and scientists consistently for the past 50 years? I suspect the reason for the applause is more insidious than benevolent. The audience applauds because they believe there is a doomsday archetypal story in which they are the superhero. The insidious aspect is with every archetypal superhero is an archetypal enemy. But who is the enemy? The audience might submit vague terms like capitalism broadly, fossil fuel usage or fossil fuel users, big oil, climate racism, CO2, the sun monster, etc. What is important about each of these enemies is that underneath these catch-all categories is simply a group of people, and many audience members also maintain membership with one or more of these enemy groups. Since physical people, rather than nebulous cosmic concepts, comprise these enemies, it follows that the enemy cannot be vanquished without vanquishing other people. Vanquishing these enemies can be done either directly by eliminating them or indirectly by eliminating aspects of the livelihood they depend on. Insidious indeed. I'd like to elaborate more on the suggestion that many, if not all, of the audience members and Greta herself intersect with one or more of the alleged climate saboteur oppressor groups. Understanding why only requires contemplating a relatively simple question. As you can see, I quite enjoy the Socratic method. How did the Youth for Climate Driving Ambition, Italy 2021, happen? Easy question, right? Someone or some group of people, maybe even the world climate leaders that Greta decries, rented out an auditorium, created an agenda, invited speakers, and put on the event. Ha! Duh! Got you, EMPM. What does any of that have to do with the evils of big oil and fossil fuel-based environmental racism? Not so fast. The event has everything to do with many different forms of energy production and material processing. Most, if not all, energy sources and materials, even paper straws, are not renewable and may never be replaced with renewables. That is, if renewable even has a reasonable and consistent definition at this point. How come this event did not happen in the woods somewhere without running water, lacking sewage management, no auditorium, and the only form of transportation to attend was walking? Why wasn't the podium made from a random collection of rocks, which originally were scattered about the woods, and the microphone a papier-mâché cone made from tree bark and spit without an amplifier? Where did the audience obtain masks, cameras, phones, and seats? Is the presence of a climate-controlled enclosure that easily resists any natural elements like rain, adverse terrain, extreme heat, and predation from wild animals a mere random cosmic coincidence? How about food? Was produce provided by the audience's collective green farms? And was the out-of-season produce plentiful? How? We only need to focus on one minor example cited to reveal that the audience members' applause is misplaced. Despite the gleeful audience members' attitude that they would not be an ill-fated subject of the agenda to which they are subscribed, they likely violated the terms of their own ideology simply by showing up to the climate-controlled building. Let us assume one walked. His walk was facilitated by shoes made with plastics, rubber, paint, textiles, and machine labor, all of which requires either in whole or in part energy production by fossil fuels and materials that can only be made from harvesting fossil fuels. The guest also likely came from a dwelling which was built using wood, metals, ceramics, glass, and uses heat generated from burning natural gas. The listener of this vodcast gets the point. Greta's loyal audience member willingly participates and or contributes to the alleged catastrophe alongside everyone else cheering for the very agenda that will take all those niceties of modern society they are enjoying away. It seems Greta's audience does not know what they are cheering for, but to be fair, I'm not 100% certain I understand the point Greta is trying to make either. Thus far, I have written a great deal on the subtle observation of the audience's response to Greta's initial 10 seconds of stunning, brave, and profound slam poetry. But there is still a minute and 20 seconds left. Thank heavens for the plethora of material samples to analyze and dissect. Greta continues by shouting random climate activist buzzwords, syncopated by the words blah, 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 or even blah, blah, blah. The creativity, masterful artisanry, and nuance brings a tear to my eye. Yet my initial thought evoked by her choice of language and delivery felt strangely in agreement. Let me explain. At the beginning of this internet journal entry, I mentioned that there is another perspective which runs contrary to the headlines. What I heard sounded familiar. Me as a teenager explaining to my friends what my parents told me I had to do in order to earn a trip to the hobby shop so I could get another model railroad item. My teenage imitation of my parents sounded something like this. You need to do the dishes every night, clean your room, vacuum the house, wipe down the bathrooms, blah, blah, blah. Notice how the connotation in my reenactment gives the listener a couple of impressions. One, that I did not want to do any of those chores, and two, that I intentionally truncated the list of chores because I felt it was excessively long and BS. Now let's hear again what Greta says, but I'll use a tenor that reflects how I first heard it. Build Back Better, green economy, net zero by 2050, net zero, climate neutral, blah, blah, blah. Here's the translation that I heard in my mind. Listen to all this climate garbage that I, Greta, have been bitching about for years. The whole audience is here to try to understand these vain buzzwords on a deeper level, but I actually don't want to do any of it, and I think it's all BS. At least, that's what I heard, and I nearly rejoiced. Alas, Greta continued with the following statement. Quote, "They're empty words and promises. Of course, we need constructive dialogue, but they've now had 30 years of blah, 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 and where has that led us?" End quote. Nice twist. Here we find a fascinating conundrum. Greta's position seems to be that all the regulations on industry, carbon credits, international treaties, subsidization of green energy, regulations on personal vehicles, limits to personal electricity usage, requirements for green buildings, and limitations on a wide variety of natural resource extraction are all chalked up to blah, blah, blah. It makes no difference to Greta that just about every major international corporation advertises constantly on sustainability and green technology, including all major aerospace companies, mind you. There are seminars, TED Talks, late-night shows, news coverage, college-level bachelor's degrees, and activist educators all joining in the cacophony of screams regarding global warming. But to Greta, this is all blah, blah, blah. How insulting. Further, a dark irony is revealed by Greta's complaint pitted against all the relentless action taken by individuals and governments alike who truly believe in the cause. As it turns out, there are still around 3 billion people who continue to burn wood or dung to keep warm. In a place like California, the taxpayers can collectively spend hundreds of millions constructing the premier Ivanpah concentrated solar power array in pursuit of renewable energy, only to find that they still have the highest electricity costs in the U.S. and deal with rolling brownouts in peak usage months when the threat of heat or cold are the highest. Greta would be pleased to know that the forests have grown substantially with the higher concentrations of CO2. But surely, she does not want to harvest them. So California does not, and instead Mother Earth will harvest with forest fires. How about mining for precious metals or inorganic compounds that are the primary constituents to every single piece of technology, from the chairs to the hundreds of smartphones that pack her auditorium? Well, we'll just leave that to China. Gas, like goes in your car? How about we have gas taxes plus carbon taxes and ban gas-powered vehicles? Has the irony manifested itself yet for you? Greta complains that all the climate rhetoric is just that, simple talk, and yet so many actions have been taken and so much currency spent on trying to pursue items exactly in line with her agenda, which has only led to more difficult living standards of the very people she touts as most at risk for climate-related burdens. At this point, you may be rightfully asking yourself another set of questions. Doesn't it seem like the legacy media loves Greta's speech? Don't the headlines seem to suggest that they are happy she is speaking truth to power? And finally, wasn't it the very same media who propped up all the world visionaries who claimed they had the secrets to solving the climate crisis? They slandered anyone who dissented, and now Greta suggests that they are not acting swiftly or radically enough. How confusing. Do not fret. Our YouTube friends will put a nice disclaimer below this video explaining what climate change actually is so you can get the facts straight. I will close by returning to the idea of the archetypal hero myth, which Greta, her audience, and the media seem to be playing out in their own worlds, and ask again, who is the enemy? Watch carefully this attempt at a clever sleight of hand. Greta complains about the 30-year climate change veterans, the legacy media cheers it on, but neither ask for a change of the guard. Instead, they argue that you EMPM viewer and subscriber, you need to give up more of your freedom and power to those same exact people so that Greta and the activists can get their vision of utopia to happen faster. And with that, guys, that is all I have for you tonight, but I am looking forward to this weekend so that I can produce more content for you. I have more Cities Skylines filmed. I have other topics that I want to talk about. Of course, I introduced yet another topic. We should really go through Greta's 10-minute long video and address it point by point. That's great. Also, I just saw last night there was an exceptional debate, or discussion rather, maybe a mixture of both, between Ben Shapiro and Anna Kasparian. I'm sure if you guys are watching my channel, you guys know who Ben Shapiro is. Conservative commentator, incredible debater, really fast talker, co-founder of the Daily Wire, of which I am a subscriber. And then Anna Kasparian, I think, is like the CEO of the Young Turks or something like that. And what I'm going to do on this channel also is I'm going to go through that debate and probably write, a blurb and make a video for kind of each point that Anna Kasparian makes. Again, we on the conservative side, we give people on the left side grace. Big thanks to Anna Kasparian for having the debate. But Ben definitely just, does what he does, coherently creating arguments around, indisputable facts, and just kind of making it seem like, she could have done a little bit more homework. No offense to her or anything. Again, that it was a good discussion, and we're going to discuss it even more because there's only so many things Ben can talk about in his small segments, and definitely Anna did. I would say fairly, I don't think this is a biased comment, is what I'm trying to say. I definitely think Anna talked a lot more. Anyway, guys, I always do this. Say I'm going to end, and then I ramble on for a little bit, but we're actually ending right now. Thank you guys for watching. Peace out.